Oh, blimey. I wasn't quite sure whether that was going to go live or we were going to exit just then, but we are live. It is very warm. Well, I don't know. Maybe it's not so warm in Ireland and Scotland. How's the weather with you guys?
I believe the Fast Show said it best when they said Scorchio. it's very much Scorchio.
Yeah, it's not too bad here. 22 degrees, a nice breeze. It's
22, only 22.
Yeah, we're always 5 degrees colder than everyone else up here in the hills, in the borders.
Well, shall I tell you, I got in the car today, like on one of my many trips to pick up my sister's kids, and I got in the car and it was 41 degrees. And trust me, I did feel like, thinking black seats in a car was not a good idea. But, managed to just about get enough cool air to get my wear out. But anyway, so here we are, another month on. And I had a conversation earlier today, and it was a really interesting conversation because something got said about we feel invisible. And I think it was one of those things where it made me go, why do we feel invisible? And I don't think for me, it's because, the whole theme is all around connection. And I think there is a point at which we can become invisible if we're not careful of being connected with ourselves. I don't know. Maybe but it was just something really struck me and it genuinely wasn't where I was thinking tonight's conversation would go, but it just really struck me what this person said to me this morning about feeling invisible and how the world can take this momentum that can make us feel disconnected from lots and lots of things. And I kind of went, oh, but it is totally relevant to our conversation. I don't know. No, maybe I've had a curly-whirly brain moment.
I think that's spot on, Laura. And what I think that's an excellent way into this conversation, because I think in my experience, when we're disconnected like that, it can go one of two ways. We can either feel like we're too important, or we can feel like we don't matter. And I've seen it happen to both. I've seen it happen to me. I've seen it happen to clients. And when we have that feeling like we don't matter, it's because we have completely lost sight of what we value. That's how we get fulfillment from life, by understanding what we value. And what I'm talking about here is emotional values, right? How we want to feel. Because in my experience, that's what we're all chasing, really. We don't really want stuff. We don't really want money. We don't really want things. We don't really want jobs or titles. We want how those things make us feel. And if we don't understand which emotional values are the most important to us, then we don't feel connected to anything. And that's how we can end up feeling invisible. And so it's really, it's key to have a really clear understanding of your core values. That way you can be really deliberate and intentional about how you live, about what your autopilot is and what your defaults are. Otherwise, your autopilot and your defaults are either 20 years out of date or you never chose them anyway. And so you're not connected to them. So you're doing things because you think you have to and you must and you ought to, rather than doing things because you want to, because you have a deep desire or a passion or, you want to get a way of feeling out of what you're doing. And when you know the ways of feeling you're looking for, that becomes like your shining light, your North Star, if you like, your GPS system. Because every choice and every decision we make, we're choosing a way of feeling. We're choosing one emotional value over the other. And if we do that deliberately, then even, the most mundane things we do in life can become very fulfilling because you know why you're doing them. You know where it's taking you. You know the feeling that you're going to get long term and in the end. And when we don't have that, everything can just feel meaningless.
And I totally get that. And And I think the question I've gone in my head is, but do we know what we want to notice or feel? Because I think, and I alluded to this in, you know, my comments to my post earlier on, was, do we really know that, or have we not adapted our feelings? Have we, you know, we're still tied up with something that was long ago, and now we're so far on that we don't know how to readdress that, to we never knew what we wanted in the first place, to actually we don't know how to identify for ourselves what it was that we want. I don't know. Mark, what do you think?
I think we don't know, but I think we're aware that something's not right. I think that's usually the starting point. Like if we take it from the you've drifted perspective, like that idea of drifting, you know, what happens when you're drifting on the water? You know, if you're not anchored to anything, you just keep going and you're taken by the current. And what is the current that we find ourselves in? Is the current the culture of the space that we're in? It's or the culture of our society. You work hard, you do more, you earn more, you get a bigger car, you get a bigger house, all those kind of pieces, which sometimes are the things we think we want. But the idea of drifting is that you don't really pay attention to where you are, and then you look up and go, Jesus, how did I get here? What am I doing here? I didn't even realize I was here. Like I can't even, and then you can't see the horizon anymore. So, and you've nothing to be anchored to at all. And if you've nothing to anchor yourself to, then you're always trying to find something, and you're chasing stuff, and you're chasing something else. So I think it's that we don't know, but I think we have an awareness that something isn't right, and that often happens to us because we've just looked up. How did I get here? It's a New Yorker cartoon I saw many years ago, and it was a very simple image of this guy. He was getting dressed, and he was after getting out of bed, and there was a girl in the bed, and he said to her, "Oh, you know, like kind of the way we've been married for the last 12 years and living together with 2 kids. I was just drunk for a while. I'm just kind of going to go off and live my life now, you know." It was just a brilliant example of just a drift that actually became like 15 years of drift. Just what are we doing here, like, you know? And it's, but the problem with answering that question honestly, it's because it's a hard answer, because if we've to admit we're not where we want to be, then that means that we have a lot of work to do. I hope that, like, if we got a paddle, we have to start that paddling, and it's a long way to paddle back to where we might want to be, or to get back towards where's the right place for us. And it can feel insurmountable because it's so far away, and the tide might be against us. So it can become a hard call as to, well, how do I do this? How do I actually make this change?
There are so many things that have gone in my head. Like, do you think it's there? I can't remember who said it, but there's a phrase that says, "No man steps into the same river at the same point twice," or words to that effect. But I think there's equally, you know, it's that classic phrase when somebody goes to you, "Oh my God, I can't believe 4 weeks has disappeared and I haven't been in touch." I mean, where's Paul? And that's exactly what we're describing, is the fact that, you know, we all say we don't have enough time, but then we equally go, "Oh my God, where's time gone?" And go, "Oh my God, 4 weeks is gone." And but I think once we have that point of, as you said, anchoring, grounding, where we've got that point, then actually we've got a point of reference. I mean, Dan used the North Star, whatever you want to call it. But I mean, the GPS is ourselves, because, you know, as I've said previously, is like the only person who will be with us for the entire journey of our lives is, unsurprisingly, ourselves. And so, you know, unless we can understand ourselves and be anchored in ourselves and what we need for ourselves, then it's quite a bumpy journey otherwise. So, and I guess that for me is the bit that I'm slowly having more and more conversations with, around how do we remain connected with ourselves within a world that's becoming increasingly disconnected. Because when you have disconnection of the self, disconnection in a system, or disconnection in an organization, disconnection in a system, disconnection in a community, what happens then?
Yeah, as you said, Laura, the most important relationship is the relationship with ourselves. I did a post on LinkedIn this morning talking about loving ourselves, not talking about romantic love, like full.
No, absolutely.
And I think, and that's, we're talking about time there. So, time is our most precious commodity, and it never stops, right? So how we spend time is what we focus on and what we put our attention on, right? And some of that focus and attention needs to go inwards, so we can ask ourselves some powerful questions, and we can learn to understand how we feel and take the time to understand how we feel, because that's the clue, right? No, we don't really know consciously, intellectually what we want. We don't. What we can understand is how we feel, that inner knowing, and learn to trust that inner knowing. That you talk about feeling alive, Laura, some people call it presence. The things that you do when you're so passionate about what you're doing, you're so full and in the moment and present, that the time seems to stand still. If we can do that bit of internal inquiry and work to figure out what are those things in life and make some time for them, give some of our attention to them, focus on them, prioritize them. And it doesn't have to be a ton, but the things that really light us up. And then once we're in that sort of space and we're giving ourselves that sort of that attention and that time and doing something just for us, just because we're passionate about it, makes us feel great, that builds our self-worth and our self-esteem, so that we understand that we do matter. In the grand scheme of things, we don't. But right here, right now, as human beings, as part of the human family and as part of families, and, we're talking about connection. Our connections to other people really matter. But if we're not fully connected to ourselves, understand ourselves, accept ourselves, know ourselves, be ourselves, love ourselves, we can't expect to have deep connections with other human beings. We can't expect people to love us and respect us if we don't love and respect ourselves. And that starts with some self-inquiry and kindness and compassion, because boy, have we all messed up in our lives. Boy, have we all done and said and thought some things we wish we hadn't. But we've got to face that stuff, understand where it came from, understand our motivations, what it means about who we want to be going forward, and then decide and declare in every moment who that is. Be deliberate and intentional about it.
And I'm totally with you. Mark, I'm just going to, somebody's Mark Ingleby said, if you feel invisible, it's the construct of your ego. And I don't know, I hear what's being said, but I don't know what you think, Mark, on that.
We create our world in every single moment of the day, Laura.
Yeah.
Everything is a perception that we have of ourselves. So I would tend to agree, because we've created that. We've created that sense of ourselves and sense of not being seen, and we're creating the story that we're telling ourselves around that, because we're not speaking up, we're not being true to ourselves, we're not being authentic. Like to Dan's post today, there's a great TED talk called The Magic of Being Yourself. Nice. But to that point, because it's when we pull back into ourselves, we're not being seen in that way. Like, you'll know this too, guys, from working people. How many people do you help try to find their voice in the coaching space, because they've been quiet for too long, and there is, it's an ego, but it's not an ego that's feels separate. It's an ego that says, I'm not good. This is where I am. I should be involved and care more here. And that's something I was just thinking as you were talking there, guys, about, and I find it really interesting about, reconnecting, right? And how we drift. And part of this is our lives are so damn busy, right? We're so damn busy all the time. And a client only asked me this recently. He said, my time is passing so fast. Like, and I'm in my 40s, and I know for yourselves, okay, time's probably passing a bit faster, right? But for young people like me, right, time is passing quite fast. Okay, I'm risking myself here, right? But it is true for us. The time is passing so fast all the time. Everything is just, mile a minute. It's the next thing, the next thing, the next thing, the next thing, So no wonder we're drifting, because we're just on all these things. But he was asking me, how do I slow down time? And that was a fantastic question. And I think how we slow down time, and it's part of how we reconnect, is we become present to what we're doing. Because we're not really that present to it. Even though we're busy, we're doing stuff, we're getting stuff done, how present are we to it? How present are we to the moment? How present are we to the people that we're with in our lives? And maybe that's a huge way for us to reconnect, is to become present. And to that point about the ego, you know, and not being seen, that's presence. To have presence, you have to be present to the space. It's all derived from the same word. I think just being present is a huge part of that reconnection. Because I think it's a question that I've been pondering for a while, since the client said to me, how am I present to my own life? Because if I'm not, well, then who's living it for me?
And I think that's it, isn't it? It's like, you know, whose life am I living is ultimately the question, isn't it, really? Because if we drift so far from where we want to be, like, well, whose life is that? And I go to a place of, so I have, I mean, partly because potentially that the word ego doesn't sit comfortably with me. So maybe ego, so that's
well, it's one of those
bias.
words, Laura, that is
no,
used
I'm very happy to hold my hand up to go, like, you know, I have a bias there.
Yeah, well, but then, you know, people use it to mean different things, the word ego, and it means different things to different. It's like the word God in some ways. It just
Totally
what ego is and what it means. And I think what Mark is talking about there is like that safety mechanism that we develop, that part of ourselves that's a construct and a creation in order to keep us safe from the world. And I think that's what he means. He's not talking about
necessarily
ego, personality.
And that's the point, that, Dan, and hence why I make the comment, is because it's this whole black, white, chalk cheese thing that can mean so two very different things for different people, and yet actually you're absolutely right, is it's actually far simpler than that, but the world makes it complicated. But I think this is half of, for me personally, this is half of how we become disconnected, how we discover that we've drifted, is because we get absorbed into the complexities of nuance. And yet actually, and I know you use this word all the time, Dan, and you do too, Mark, but curiosity. When we lose that sense of curiosity and that willingness to step into a space and listen, be curious, to seek, as Kobe says, seek first to understand before being understood. If we did that a little bit more often, it'd be a different kettle of fish, but, you know, here we go. But then the narrative changes, because actually it is a learning space, it is an understanding space, and I think that's where we start to connect differently. Maybe
and I think the thing that blew my mind the most in my life, the realization I had that just changed everything for me, was, so when we were talking there about, Mark was talking there about that guy who was like, if I'm not present in my life, whose life am I living and who's living it? When you start asking yourself those sort of questions, it's then that you realize, hang on a minute, I'm the experiencer. I'm the witness of what's going on here. I'm not the thing that's happening. I'm not the body it's happening to. I'm not the mind that's creating a story about it. I am the witness of all these things. It's nothing freed me from my head and my mind like finding that out and suddenly realizing I could have attention in my body in the moment, in a connection with somebody else, and what presence was, and then beginning to be able to cultivate that in my life. Because you can't really know yourself unless you fully know and understand you are the observer of everything that's happening, of all your senses, of everything you're thinking and feeling. You are not those things. You're witnessing them, and then you're creating a story around it to bring it into physical reality, which is actually what's slightly ever after what you're actually experiencing. But anyway, I'm getting a bit too far up there. But
it's the big conversation, and this is the thing, is it's actually a really big conversation, and it's a really, I mean, this is something that could make, like, 6 months worth of conversations, because it is really, really important. And I think I have sat in so many conversations recently, well, no, not recently, for as long as I can remember, that are all around connecting with ourselves, with systems, with organizations, with communities. And for me, it's crucial. And so, I think it has to be talked about. And I think the struggle is, we're seeing all the symptoms everywhere about disconnection, and yet we haven't really got the answers. I know. So, Mark, what's your miracle answer? No pressure.
I have to charge you if I reveal it, Laura, but like, isn't that the thing too, though? That we all want a miracle answer. We all want an easy solution. Like, this is the 5 things you need to do to change your life. Like, it's not one thing. It's not just a simple. Like, it's about reconnection to the world around you, the world you live in. I often think, I wrote a talk on it once, on that that idea that I still don't know what I want to be when I grow up. And I think there's such truth to that statement, and that's one of the statements alone that sends us drifting. Because if you were 7 or 8 or 10 in school, and the teacher was asking you what you wanted to be, and the kids who put their hand up, who said, I want to be a nurse, or I want to be a fireman, or I want to be a doctor, there's a similarity in all those jobs. They're serving community, they're serving people, they're adding value, okay? And they were the lucky kids, because they knew what they wanted to be, because they knew intrinsically, they knew they wanted to be of service in some way, so they could see that. The rest of us were like, I don't know, should I say doctor? Should I say fire? Like, what do I want to be a professional footballer? I want to be a trapeze artist? I don't know, So the rest of us spend our lives still not knowing what we wanted to be. But maybe we've got the question wrong, because we think of what I want to be as, well, I want to be successful, I want to be a banker, I want to be, a prime minister, I want to be, we think of it in title and job. But maybe the answer to that question is, I want to be happy, or I want to be content, or I want to be satisfied with the life that I've chosen to live. But we didn't know that was an option when we were asked the question. We were never told that was an option. We always had to pick something. And then we spent the rest of our life trying to figure out, what is it I want to be when I grow up? And maybe if we stop trying to be the thing that we don't know we want to be, and start trying to live in that moment, then we find our way to what actually we want to be. Because if we look back at the end and we can say to ourselves, God, I had lived a life where I was happy, or I lived a life where I was satisfied, or I lived a life where I loved, well, then isn't that a successful life? So there is your simple answer, Laura.
Absolutely. And actually, isn't it? That's just the point, the fact that actually, aren't we living it already, if only we stop to pause and notice?
Yeah, notice how we feel, Laura. Notice what emotions we're choosing. Mark named some lovely ways of feeling there, didn't he? Content, satisfied. We all get confused and think having drive and ambition, wanting to get things done, means we're not satisfied and content. No. Come from a place of contentment and satisfaction, and then watch how powerful you can be and how you can affect the world around you.
But I think that's exactly the point. I mean, it comes back to for me, where we go, unless we're grounded, anchored, whatever word you wish to say, everything else, we are just in the wind, being pulled all over the place, and we can't have focus. But how can we? So we're just like batting around in that. But the moment that we are grounded, connected with ourselves, got a root system through ourselves, then actually we are in an entirely different space to be able to have contentment, all the rest of it. And then all the noise in the world suddenly becomes quite different, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and you feel like you have more choice, don't you, when you approach life?
Well, yeah, because everything is just an evaluation. It's like, okay, so I want, this is what it looks like, and I'm just evaluating everything. That doesn't fit to it, that fits to it, that doesn't. You know, it suddenly becomes a way that you were evaluating everything.
Yeah,
and I think,
choosing what you give your attention to.
Yeah, totally. And I think this is the challenge for me, is that we roll in continually and we don't take that moment to go, right, I've just got to have 5 minutes to myself. And in my world, do a few post-it notes over my kitchen island. Don't cook on the kitchen, but I do some great post-it note sessions on my kitchen island. Brilliant. Who knew that that's what you do with a kitchen island? But that's what I do. But my point, you know, joking aside, my point aside is that it's making the things that are in my head grounding to a space where I can go, okay, now this is my stake in the ground. Doesn't matter what goes on around me. You know, the news can be rubbish, which it invariably is at the moment. And maybe for some time, we can't control that, but I can control this. I can have visibility of that, and I can take a step forward. I don't know. Maybe I've simplified the world too much, but I think that's what many are struggling with in terms of trying to reconnect with themselves. Drifting too much. Maybe I'm not.
Well, there is, like, it goes back, like, I know I referred to it there before, but it goes back to when we were younger and you had a sense of yourself in the world, and a sense of what made you happy, and a sense of what you wanted to do, and a sense of what you wanted to be. It's just a sense of it, even if it wasn't the sort of title thing. And often that's the thing we find ourselves going back to, because that's reconnecting to who we are and what we were brought to do and what we can bring out of ourselves a little bit. But it's a hard thing to connect to when you've drifted so far away that you don't know it anymore, you know?
Yeah.
Like, it's interesting how many times you might do a values exercise with someone, and you know this in particular, like, you know, with men who are senior leaders, like, values? What are you talking about values, you know? Like, what are your values? And I thought, I don't know, like, and then when you actually look at them, and I was doing one with a guy lately, and he gave me back a list of, we did a good exercise, and he gave me back a list of trying things. I don't know how to rank them. I said, well, that's why you have a challenge here. Like, they're not all the same. They can't all mean the same. They can't have the same worth. So I need to see you actually put the work in to give them some sense of ranking, so we can begin to understand. Because what's really interesting is I remember doing this exercise with a guy years ago, and then he kept on coming back to me going, my God, no wonder that's pissing me off. It goes against this value. No wonder I'm annoyed by that. That goes against this value. No wonder this has me out of kilter. Goes against its value. And for him, it was just such an awareness of the undercurrent of sense of the world that he had that he wasn't tuned into at all. Because it is there too. There's this little undercurrent running through us, you know. And sometimes we have our rules that we live by that kind of inform my values, but they're not really, because some of them are a bit warped, you know, like everyone has to treat me right. Lovely idea, but, like, you know, people can't. And if you let that piss you off, yeah, if you let that piss you off, you're in trouble. Like, I always joke with people about, you know, when people say that we're people pleasers and we act in a way that we want everyone to like us. And I say, okay, that's lovely. Do you like everyone you've met? And everyone goes, no. Well, why does everyone have to like you then? You know? What a crazy juxtaposition that is in our mind. Like, that's a dichotomy. We can't help that. That's what we do. But it is that connection to values and the present moment. If you can find your way to live that in that moment, to be conscious of them. Like when you were saying there about time passing, I spend a lot of time at the kitchen table now. It's mayhem. My house is mayhem at the kitchen table, right? So it's like 4 people with ADHD and 4 people appears in the house. So the conversation's going. It's a weave tapestry of stuff, right? But sometimes I just sit back and just enjoy what's happening and enjoy, because I'm conscious that this is just a moment in time, and this moment is going to pass like every other single moment was. But I have a little Kodak camera going snip, snap, snap, just for that piece, so that I can remember that and bring it. And it's not that I'm living in the past and trying to build nostalgia. No, I'm trying to remember the present and build that out, because that was a moment to be enjoyed and not endured. And it's finding that space, and even when it is antagonizing and deliberately, so half the time it's me doing that, but just to sit back and just watch it flow, that's just lovely. You know, that's lovely, because when you're doing that, there's the stress of this piece I have to get done for work isn't there. The mess that's outside that I have to clean up isn't there. Nothing else is there.
Time does slow down, Mark, doesn't it?
It's
still
that is so critical, though.
Experiencing everything with using all your senses, your attention's a bit inside as well as outside. So you're experiencing all the feelings, all the emotions, the richness of that moment, rather than just fighting your way through it, which is what we so often do, and why we feel like time is just running away.
100%, and that's how we find the time in our lives, because it's there, it's right there, it's in that moment. There it is.
And I think it's so important. And you talking about the moment that we notice. I have a dear friend who uses photography, and she talks about it being her perfect meditation, because she, in that moment, is totally focused and the world stops. And, I was with her a couple of weekends ago, and literally, we literally went out for a walk. Both of us, phone. She had a whole camera get up. She's not a trained photographer as such. She's just learned herself. But in that moment, we're connecting with ourselves, with nature, with everything, and the whole frame changes. And I think this is what we are struggling to do, societal. Is that right? No, that's not the right word. You know what I mean. That we are struggling to do currently. And I think that really matters, to be able to slow time down, to notice, to feel, because that's the difference in order for us to take the next step forward. But I am very conscious that time as ever is upon us, and others have to rush to do other things. But as ever, thank you guys. Any last words to share before you have to disappear?
I would say, remember, you are the noticer. You were saying there, Laura, about notice. That's who you are. Essentially, you are consciousness aware of yourself. That's it, right? So be aware, notice.
We have that sense that we're slipping through the fingers of time. It's just time slipping through our fingers, but it's that we are slipping through the fingers of time. Time just exists, and we're just passing on through it. We just stop and go, oh, it's this time, and then we stop and go, oh, it's this time. That's all that's happening. It's nice and easy to say in this lovely calm moment. And I'm about to get back into mayhem, and then I wonder where it's gone again, But it's there. It's just there. We just need to stop for a second.
Yeah. Brilliant. As ever, guys, thank you. And until next month for more fun.